The Pacific Islands of the United States are very much set apart from other U.S. regions. Not only geographically far away, but unique in their geography, culture, and reliance on the ocean. The actual landmass is relatively small, made up of the Hawaiian Islands, American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands. But the waters of NOAA Fisheries jurisdiction there, 1.7 million square nautical miles, is roughly equal to every other U.S. regions combined. This is Dive In with NOAA Fisheries. I'm John Sheehan, and today we're concluding our series on regional scientific surveys with a look at the waters, islands, atolls, and archipelagos of the U.S. Pacific Islands.
We're surrounded by a rich diversity of marine life that is vital to our culture and economic stability. We thrive on sustainable seafood. It's the key to our health and well-being.
That's Dr. Mike Secchi, the director of the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. We'll talk about how the surveys supporting seafood and fishing are central to the Pacific Islands' culture and economy.
We also benefit from recreational and commercial fishing industries, which contribute nearly $1 billion in sales and 10,000 jobs to our economy.
And the challenges of managing marine resources in such a far-ranging and remote part of the globe.
What makes it unique is that we also have the responsibilities for our highly migratory species. These include the tuna billfish that migrate across thousands of miles, as well as the marine mammals and sea turtles. So it's a huge lift from a geographical jurisdictional standpoint.
Dr. Secchi began his career with NOAA Fisheries more than 40 years ago, first as a research scientist and later in executive roles, and all of it in the Pacific Islands. He recently announced his forthcoming retirement. Dr. Mike Secchi, welcome to Dive In with NOAA Fisheries. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Can you give us a sense of how the waters themselves of the Pacific Islands differ from other U.S. coastal waters?
Coastally, around the islands, they drop off very, very quickly. So we don't have a continental shelf. In some areas, in the Marianas, you go off hundreds of yards and they'll drop off hundreds of feet. These are volcanoes that rise off the ocean floor. It's why you can have off the big island of Hawaii, high seas migratory species come right up there and are vulnerable to the boats that want to go and try catching them. But maybe the bigger piece to this is the blue water. Often people don't realize the vastness of the ocean. For the thousands and thousands of miles, the weather is made up by very different physics. The assumption is that you find fish distributed throughout the region equally, but it's not. They're very aggregated, they're very clumped. They tend to go to convergence regions where the food gathers, where the physics converge, or where there's higher areas of productivity. Eddies and meanders provide unique areas that have shown to support the migration of many of the animals, whether they're fish or protected species, across the ocean basin. But it's also where these environments are key to management, because a lot of our fisheries here then become shared regions for these protected species, and therefore they become bycatch concerns for some of the fisheries because they're targeting the same area.
Can we talk a little bit about the tools at your disposal, speaking of the surveys you conduct in order to make your decisions around conservation and the management?
We have many different kinds of surveys. Our fisheries assessments, especially for the large pelagics, they migrate. And so you need to understand their life history from wherever they are. A lot of them spawn in other parts of the Pacific Ocean. They migrate as juveniles and they're harvested at different places. And they all may have different stock boundaries. And so that poses a challenge in conducting a quote-unquote survey to get the information to understand the stock status. So we use fishery-dependent data, meaning catches. So we use catch and we use effort for those who go and catch them to come up with a standardized metric that we use in our assessments for many of these species. In some of our more coastal waters, it's a little more challenging because so many of the species are very cryptic. It's a very skilled fishery. So you find some of the older fishers on smaller boats. They go through generations of learning the art of how to harvest some of these resources. So what we have done for like our insular species, our commercially valuable bottom fish fisheries here, we partner with the industry. We go out there and they conduct the actual directed fishing. And that's worked really, really well. So much so that in the first year of the COVID pandemic, when it used to be partially conducted off NOAA ships, we couldn't do it because we were all taken offline. But the fishers were able to go and carry it out. So throughout COVID, we never lost a survey in those years. The fishers were able to go out there, conduct the survey, and we still got the data.
Just a quick note here. I found this really impressive. During COVID, some science centers couldn't field any surveys. But because Dr. Seki and his science center already had this community partnership in place, that let them accomplish it.
For our protected species, a lot of it is doing surveys for the marine mammal populations, and there's still the traditional visual surveys. But we've invested over time to use passive acoustics. And when I say passive acoustics, this is just ambient noise. We've made the investment to monitor this noise with towed arrays of these acoustic sensors. Sensors can be sitting on drifting buoys. We have them moored, so they're out there all over the Pacific. And so the big investment from a science side is to convert these acoustic signatures to quantitative numbers. And that becomes your holy grail, where now you'll have eyes in the water. Monk seals, signature protected species out here, gravely endangered. We put out teams out into the primary breeding grounds, which is the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, to actually go out there every year to actually do the counts, to do some recovery aspects, to monitor the general health of the population.
One more thing. We'll hear about monk seals and the Science Center's conservation efforts a little later in the show. Stick around.
Coral reefs, so we do coral reef surveys. When we had more access to ship time, we would rotate. Where we did Hawaii one year, we would do the Marianas one year, would send the ships to American Samoa one year. And so they would kind of divide up the Pacific and do those every 3 or 4 years. As it became harder and harder to do that, we've kind of scaled back. But we've been doing it for 15 years. So we have very good baseline. We had oceanographers, we had divers, we had benthic teams. And so it was a very comprehensive surveys of the coral reefs of where they went out, with the model being that we could look at reefs in Samoa, reefs in the Marianas, reefs in Hawaii, and how are they functioning comparably. We have high sea surveys that we go out there to do oceanographic work. We use that a lot to kind of look at understanding how the ocean functions along with where the animals are. So we look at how the animals use the ocean, as well as how the food webs are structured. And then we have the social economic surveys. When COVID came in, we had them out there looking at the impacts due to COVID. Prior to that, you look at how the various communities are impacted by decisions that managers make, or how there's a reliance on the resources, because they're all different. They all differ for each of these areas. So many surveys, data becomes the basis for all that we do on the science side. Surveys are really the fundamental means by which we get it, whether it's a survey we conduct on a white ship, or whether they're surveys by our folks going out there and reaching out, whether they're down at the fish auction monitoring what comes in, or whether they're doing it by mail, or whatever it is. These surveys are fundamental to what we do.
Yeah. And they sound, in many cases, to be so collaborative, whether in cases of working with community members and fishermen, or, as you say, citizen scientists.
They have to be, and it goes beyond even what I've just said, even for some of our life history work. So we need the full range of understanding the age of the animals, the size and maturity, how much they're reproducing. And often you can't get your hands on all of the specimens that you need within the structure of a given animal's life history. So we rely on these partnerships, rely on these folks to get, they got a strange size fish, they got a very large fish, and whatever it is, we built that relationship. So it's been really good. It works all around.
Can we talk a little bit more about how the Science Center interacts with indigenous populations? What are some other ways that you interact with communities outside of surveys?
The Native Hawaiians and indigenous people throughout the Pacific Islands, they rely on the ocean for physical and spiritual nourishment. The traditional practice of fishing connects the local communities to the natural world through a reciprocal relationship where caring for the environment allows the environment to sustain the community. We work with these communities in the Pacific to understand the traditional practices of sustainable harvest, conservation management, and the role that fishing plays in these cultures. The Science Center conducts oral history interviews of elder fishermen in American Samoa to document traditional knowledge of marine use and resource management. We're also working to improve our understanding of the cultural dimension of marine seascapes. So we have a project that identifies differences in not only the specific marine taxa emphasized in management documents, and those emphasized in foundational Hawaiian texts, but also a difference in the management domains and cultural heritage domains that those taxa represent. We're developing this into a more robust line of research to bridge indigenous and non-indigenous paradigms to strengthen the management.
And finally, you recently announced that you're retiring after more than 40 years here at NOAA Fisheries. So first, congratulations. That's amazing. And I'm wondering what takeaways you have after such a long career in the region.
Thank you first. It seems like an eternity, but it's gone by so fast. And when I started really back in 1979. And my first trip in 1980, I was up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and we were doing some exploratory surveys. We did exploratory fishing surveys back then. There were no commercial fisheries there. But we were up there, and monk seals were obviously there, and we would go on the beaches. And they were quite pristine. I think the one striking thing I took away that over the 40 years, the amount of debris that now litters those islands are orders of magnitude, tens of orders of magnitude over what it was when I first started going up there. And that is one of the saddest things that I have seen over the course of my work with NOAA.
Yeah, I've seen some of these photographs, and not having a frame of reference for what they used to look like, they're scattered. There's just plastic debris everywhere.
And, a lot of these debris, they take decades to wash in or to land onto the beaches. So the amount of debris in the ocean, and they're all breaking down into microplastics, should be a really big concern. I think it's going to be a pretty big issue. It's already a big issue, but it'll become even more of one in the years to come.
Mm-hmm. Well, with retirement, you already live in Hawaii. Where do you go now? Are you going to pull a 180 and move to New Jersey, or?
No, I'll be here. So that's the other unique thing. I don't think you find many people who spend their entire career in one place. And so all of my 40 years have been here. I don't plan to go anywhere. I have children, and they've kind of moved out, but even they want to come back. So I've been around, and there are not many other places that I've come across that I'd rather live in. So I'll be here.
Dr. Mike Secchi, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Great talking.
Dr. Mike Secchi is the director of the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. What you're hearing are the vocalizations of monk seals, recorded on a hydrophone. That weird snapping and crackling sound is actually shrimp. Monk seals are an endangered species, and one that NOAA Fisheries takes great care in trying to rebuild and protect. In fact, thanks to conservation efforts, the monk seal population exceeded 1,500 last year, the first time in 2 decades.
Monk seals are the world's only living tropical pinniped. They live exclusively in Hawaiian waters, from the remote northwestern Hawaiian Islands that are part of Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, all the way down to the populated high islands.
That's my next guest, Dr. Michelle Barbieri, the leader of the Hawaiian Monk Seal Research Program at the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. I wanted to learn a little more about how the Science Center protects and tracks monk seals, especially considering that the majority of them live on the small, sparse islands of the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, hundreds and hundreds of miles from the main Hawaiian Islands. Dr. Michelle Barbieri, welcome to Dive In with NOAA Fisheries.
Thank you so much for having me.
let's talk about monk seals. Why are they so endangered? What are the big threats?
There are a variety of different threats to the species, and some of those differ geographically as well. Seals in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands that primarily reside in Papahanaumokuakea, they are facing a multitude of threats, including food limitation, which impacts survival of juveniles to reach adulthood. That's really important for an endangered species because you need those adult animals to be the breeding population to sustain the species. They also get entangled in marine debris and drown. They also suffer from shark predation and a very specific part of the island chain that's lalo or French frigate shoals. And it's an unfortunate reality that impacts about 25% of the pup cohort every year. They face a variety of other threats there that include aggression between seals, seals that get separated from their moms or suffer from wounds. And when we're there doing our work, we're not just surveying the population, but we're actually doing a lot of real hands-on conservation interventions to target these threats. Down in the Maine Hawaiian Islands, threats are a little bit different. They tend to be more anthropogenic in nature. So those are things like, unfortunately, fisheries interactions, whether with hooks and line or with nets, intentional killings, and also disease. And the leading disease is toxoplasmosis, which is a disease that a lot of animals can get, but it affects monk seals as well, surprisingly enough, caused by a parasite that's shed in the feces of cats. So that parasite makes its way to the ocean and can infect and kill monk seals.
And what are some of the ways that you combat these threats?
We're really hands-on. In the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, our field teams, when they're there, are trained to disentangle seals from marine debris. They are trained to intervene in terms of translocating monk seals from areas, for example, of high shark predation risk or entrapment to places where they're safer. There are some places in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands where there are pieces of infrastructure from many, many years ago where that infrastructure is no longer being maintained and is kind of falling apart and kind of creates these tricky situations for monk seals to get in and out of. So our teams can intervene to free animals from those threats. They can reunite mom-pup pairs that get separated, do things like intervene for seals that have wounds or traumatic interactions, whether it's from another seal or something else. We train them to lance abscesses. We train them to give antibiotic injections. We also have a vaccination program, which is more in a preventative sense, but our field teams are also vaccinating monk seals during the course of their activities. One of the really cool things that we're able to do now more than ever is partner with the Marine Mammal Center. They have a facility in Kailua Kona on Hawaii Island that's called Keikaiola, and they are able to rehabilitate malnourished seals that are suffering from food limitation. When we're there on our NOAA ships to deploy and recover our field camps that are doing all of this work, we're able to bring seals that are malnourished on board the ship, triage, provide medical care, and then transport them down to Keikaiola where they can work their magic and get those animals fattened up and ready to be returned back to the population.
Yeah, you're also a veterinarian, and so you work on these seals.
Yes, I spend a fair bit of time on the ship giving seals the hydration they need, the calories that they need. We get that started by tube feedings. We do some preliminary health assessments on them and just do everything we can to give them the supportive care that they need until they get to the full-fledged hospital. As a veterinarian, I'm really involved in a lot of the interventions we do here in the Maine Hawaiian Islands, such as removing hooks that seals might ingest that are life-threatening. And unfortunately, whenever we need to do a necropsy, we're really involved in terms of using necropsies and carcasses as the opportunity to better understand why animals die, what the threats are, and characterize those. Toxoplasmosis typically results in seals that we find dead. We have, on rare occasions, had the opportunity to try to treat those animals. We haven't been successful yet. Our partners at Keikaiola are working tightly with us to try to make some movement on that, but that is a really challenging one clinically.
And how is the recovery going for monk seals? Is the population seeing any growth?
We are seeing the payoffs of a lot of the interventions that we're doing, and that is to say that since 2013, the population has been growing on average at about 2% per year range-wide. So that's really exciting news. We did a study a few years back where we looked at the impact directly of those interventions, and about 25 to 30% of the population that's around today is around because they're the result of seals that benefited from interventions that saved their lives, or they're the offspring of adult females who did. So it feels really good to be able to say that we feel that we're making a difference. We are moving the needle for this endangered species. It still takes a lot of work, and we have a whole lot of work yet to do, especially as we're looking into the face of climate change and a lot of other things.
Yeah. Let's talk about the survey itself and what it takes to actually get you and your colleagues out to the monk seals. And let's start with sort of a description of the Northwestern Islands, because they're very sparse and there's not a lot on them. It's kind of hard to picture. I tried looking them up on Google Maps and couldn't even see them.
You're right. And there are a few that are much taller and narrower. So those are islands like Nihoa and Mokumanamana. They have very little sandy beach, but they are still habitat for seals. But yeah, you're right. The vast majority of the islands there are low-lying sandy islands and atolls. So in many places, all that's left is just one sandy island. One of them has a lake in the middle. They're all a little bit different. Some of them might only take you 2 or 3 minutes to walk the perimeter. Others are 7 miles around. So they're quite variable in size and shape, and they're quite ephemeral in terms of year-to-year variation as well. But they are beautiful places with rich wildlife, and there's a lot of effort across agencies and partners to restore these islands to their natural state, reintroduce species that have been extirpated, restore habitats and plants, native plants, and also try to rid them of some of the other impacts and threats of civilization over time.
And so logistically, how do you get out there, and what are you're setting up camps on sometimes big, sometimes small islands?
Yes, we're setting up camps. We typically go out in the springtime. We'll be sailing on the NOAA ship Oscar Elton Seti. That is a ship that's a little over 200 feet long. Our teams are 18 people in size, give or take, each year. And we put everything that they need to spend a summer in a remote island on that ship and get that out to their island every single year. And then at the end of the field season, we do the entire thing in reverse, and we'll pick everything up, pick up all of our teams, and bring them back to Honolulu. So it takes a lot of work. We will take, for example, several pallet tubs to each individual island full of gear. Those get craned from the ship onto a small boat. The small boat takes them through the shallows to shore, and then we are all on shore pulling the items out of the pallet tub lid, stacking them on the beach, pulling the pallet tub out, putting that on the beach, and then putting everything back in the pallet tub. We hand carry water jugs for their entire water needs for an entire summer.
That's so much.
We get a good workout.
That's so much stuff. Oh, wow. And does the team then stay there and the boat pulls away and is like, well, see you at the end of summer?
That's exactly what happens. The ship will pull away and we wave goodbye, and our communications with them for the rest of the season will be over a satellite phone and inReach, and then a lot of email. But it's not the email that we're all used to having. It's not that they have access to the internet. It's very basic satellite email that can't send big files or anything like that. So they're pretty remote, and a lot of them really love it. And we also really like it when we're out there as well. It's one of the things I enjoy most about my job is being able to disconnect, unplug, really focus on what we're there to do, what our mission is, and just be in such a beautiful, special place that has such importance in terms of the ecosystem and also culturally.
And so what is a day in this survey like? You wake up in camp and go start counting seals.
In the morning, yeah. The teams are set up with, each person has an individual personal tent. There's also an office tent and a kitchen tent. So they get their day started just like a lot of the rest of us do, just in a beautiful remote place, getting ready to go out and do a seal survey for the day. The surveys that they do are focused primarily on population assessment. So that means identifying seals, counting seals, documenting their individual markings that are distinctive, documenting tags that they have. And then most important thing is to get those pups that are newly weaned tagged. So they keep track of which pup matched up with which mom and try to get flipper tags into that pup and keep track of who's who so that we know over time how those animals survive throughout their life. And one of the most important metrics for looking at the population is survival of these juveniles to adulthood. And that is one of the things that we're really closely tracking every single year.
So you participate in these surveys to the degree of going out and helping your colleagues unload the boats and prepare the campsites, but you haven't spent a season out there. What do your colleagues tell you about what they do and, a few weeks in and haven't seen anybody in a while?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everybody looks at it as a different type of opportunity to maybe learn to play an instrument because there aren't that many people out there to hear you learning. Definitely a lot of reading. I love catching up with everyone at the end of the field season and getting book recommendations. It's fantastic. There are also some really artistic people on these teams, and they create amazing works of art, whether it be through painting or other media, sometimes even using debris and trash that they pick up from the beaches. It is for sure something that we think about in terms of how we assign people to different islands as well, because the camps in some places may be as small as just 2 people for 3 to 5 months straight without really any visitors. So they need a lot of stuff to keep them occupied, but we certainly do keep them busy with work as well.
Dr. Michelle Barbieri, thanks so much.
Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure.
Dr. Michelle Barbieri is the leader of the Hawaiian monk seal research program at the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. As I mentioned at the top of the interview, the monk seal population exceeded 1,500 in 2021. And while this is definitely good news, the recovery is fragile and challenges remain. You can read all about it at our website, fisheries.noaa.gov. And while you're there, check out the rest of our series on regional science centers and the surveys that are foundational to their work. Each U.S. region, from Alaska to the West Coast, to the North and Southeast, out to the Pacific Islands, they're all unique and fascinating. It's worth a listen. I'm John Sheehan, and this has been Dive In with NOAA Fisheries.